By the age of 16, I already knew exactly what I wanted to be when I grew up, a professional basketball player. So going into my final year of high school, I knew this would be an important launching pad for the rest of my life. So I worked really hard on my game that summer, and by the end of my senior season, all my work had paid off. By the end of that year, through 25 games, all of my teammates, coaches, even my opponents knew you could count on Dre for about 20 points contribution. That's not Kobe Bryant or Steph Curry numbers, but it's a solid contribution. But my 20 points weren't my per game average. I scored 20 points all season put together in total. Now, any reasonable, logical person would think, okay, kid, you're going to be successful at something, but it ain't going to be basketball. 5 years later, defying the odds, I was in Kaunas, Lithuania, signing my first pro basketball contract. Now, if everything had gone perfect, even from that point forward, I wouldn't be standing up here today. But real life, as they say, tends to alter the lab test. Over the next 9 years of a very up and down career, while I did get to see and play in places like Kaunas, Lithuania, Herceg-Novi, Montenegro, and Pula, Croatia, I also saw places like the stock room of a supermarket where I worked the overnight shift, the surprisingly busy telemarketing company. You ever get those letters in the mail that say, congratulations, you're eligible to win $10 million. Just dial this 1-800 number to verify your entry. Stuff we throw away as junk mail. Well, you'd be surprised how many people call. Also played for a traveling team right here in the United States, where we took 8-hour road trips in between games, riding in what they claimed to be a 15-passenger van. Now, I'm 6 feet 4 inches tall. If you can fit 15 of me in one of those vans, I have a prize for you backstage. About 3 to 4 years into what I was struggling to keep together and call a career, I realized I wasn't getting the type of return on investment that I wanted to get from basketball, and I needed to get more control. One thing I had been doing at that point was publishing to this still pretty new website called YouTube.com. There on YouTube, I had found an audience of athletes who wanted to learn how to work on their games, both physically and mentally when it came to basketball and life. But looking at YouTube, I ran into the same issue I did in basketball, was that I didn't own the platform. I didn't control how things went or when I got to do it. So I needed another option. At the same time, I had been writing about my experiences, places I had been, things I was going through, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And it was there that I ran into the audience that led to me giving this talk. These were the athletes who existed in this large gray area of professional sports, where they weren't necessarily looking for skill help. They knew how to play. They knew they were good at what they did. But at the same time, they weren't able to find jobs. They couldn't get a contract. They weren't getting the return on investment that they expected from all the years they put into the game. My aim today is to help any athlete, any artist struggling to sell their work, any student trying to figure out what to do with their lives, any person who's invested a lot of time into anything to guarantee a return on that investment. Now, if you think about someone taking actions to become a professional athlete in any sport, usually by that point, they've invested somewhere between 10 and 15 years into the game. But the odds of anyone making it haven't changed at all over the last 50 years. And since only so many of us can become trainers, coaches, or analysts, what happens to the athlete who has put all this time in but can't get any return on that investment? Well, I'm an example of what happens, I'll tell you. Being an assistant manager of Foot Locker happens. Selling gym memberships at Bally Total Fitness happens. That overnight shift at the supermarket happens. That telemarketing job happens. In other words, you take your 15 years of investment and you put it on the shelf, no pun intended, and you go do something else to pay the bills. The essential question I want to answer here today is, how can any person guarantee a return, a way that they can capitalize on their experience, even when the experiences didn't go the way you thought they would? The answer is a simple 4-step process. Step number 1 is understanding that all the bad stuff is actually the good stuff. My experience in basketball, long story short, was that I put all this time in and I wasn't getting the return on investment. But going through those experiences is how I picked up on and learned my present-day expertise. For example, when I first started playing basketball, there was no one around to teach me. I was 14 years old. No one in the neighborhood took me under their wing. My father's 5'9". He couldn't teach me how to play basketball. I decided that if I just went to the park during the daytime in Philadelphia, where I'm from, when it's kind of too hot in the summer for anyone to be out on that blacktop and just practice more than everybody else, maybe I could catch up to all the players who were ahead of me. Now, mind you, this is the mid-'90s, so there's no blogs that tells me this is going to work. There's no YouTube video I can use as an example. This was just a random idea, and over time, it started to work for me. Through that experience and many others, I learned discipline. When I got out of college and I wanted to become a professional athlete, nobody knew who I was, so I needed to go somewhere and get myself seen. I attended what we know as an exposure camp. For those of you who don't know what that is, think of a job fair, but it's for athletes. So instead of wearing a suit and handing out your resume, you wear a pair of sneakers and you play your sport in front of an audience of decision makers, agents, coaches, scouts, people who can help move you forward in your career. About a few minutes, maybe 3 to 5 minutes into the first game of that exposure camp that I was playing in, there was a timeout, and I'd been doing a whole bunch of nothing out there on the court. Now, instead of listening to the coach during the timeout, I had a conversation with myself. I said, Dre, you invested your last $250 to come to this exposure camp. You literally cannot afford to leave here having done nothing. You need to get out there, get aggressive, do something that makes you stand out here, because you won't get another shot at this if you blow this opportunity. Well, I took my own advice, went out there, played a lot harder, played a lot better, and my performance at that exposure camp jump-started my career. That experience was the first of many that taught me confidence. Now, a month after that exposure camp, I was back home, and in the mail, I received what I had actually been waiting for, which was the game film, the footage from this exposure camp. And it existed on what we knew back then as a VHS tape. I went online and I called or emailed every pro basketball agent I could find to try to get one of them to take me on as a client to represent me to these international teams who could possibly sign me. Well, one of those agents took me on, and he's the one who helped get me to Lithuania to start my career. That experience taught me personal initiative, taking control of a situation and making things happen instead of waiting for them to happen. Now, a few years after that, I had just come home for the summer from playing in Montenegro. I had a brand new agent at this time. This guy had a bigger base of clients, more clout it seemed, and I had just played, and I had some new game footage now. And this was on a DVD. I figured all I needed to do that summer was work on my game really hard and just sit and wait for the phone to ring. Well, August, September, October went by, the phone didn't ring. And for many years, I hated those 3 months out of the year, and here's why. That's the time of year when professional basketball teams convene, training camp starts, and you start practicing and playing. I spent too many years during those months unsigned, not knowing when I was going to be employed again. Thankfully, I like those months again. But through those situations, I learned the skill of mental toughness. Now, what's the challenge with us looking at the bad experiences we go through and actually getting something out of them? I'll tell you what it is. We think that if people are going to respect us and be impressed by us and admire us, we need to tell them about our successes, our achievements. And the thing is, that's true. But if you're going to help other people and get some return on your own investment through helping those people, you need more than to impress people. See, if I sit here and stand here and tell you that I set a goal to become a professional athlete and I did it, you may respect that, maybe even admire it. But 99 out of 100 people cannot relate to that. But if I tell you, I set a goal to become this, and despite all the time I put into it, it just wasn't giving me the return that I thought I would get. Everyone can relate to that. The point you need to take away from your bad experiences in life is that we respect your successes, but we relate to your failures. Step number 2, analysis. When I was in high school, I told you I scored 20 points all season combined, right? Where I'm from in Philadelphia, there's this newspaper called the Philadelphia Daily News. After every day that there was a high school game, and we all played on the same days, the next day in the newspaper, they would print up all the scores from the games, each school, and each player on each team, how many points they scored. So every day after we had a game, I would hustle to the newsstand, pay 60 cents for the Philadelphia Daily News, flip really quick to the high school sports section, find my school, look down and try to find my name. Dre Baldwin, 2. Now, I told you about my first exposure camp and how I talked myself into playing a lot better and how that helped start my career. That wasn't the last exposure camp I went to. I went to several more, and some of those camps, just based on my performance, I didn't even want the game footage. Now, you may wonder why I even bring that up. Why do I even think about it? Why not just bury that and only talk about the things that I did that were great? Understand that any experience we go through is only valuable if you can draw education from that experience. The simplest way to do that is to ask yourself a question. Why did this happen? When we look at our own experiences, the reason why we often don't learn from them, things that happened in our past, is because when we fail, we either start wallowing in the emotions of failure and the reasons why it's not working, or we try to bury it, suppress it, and move on to the next thing and try to get back to succeeding again. And when we succeed, our egos delude us into believing that this is just going to keep happening because we're divinely ordained to just win in life. This is why we don't learn much from our past experiences. But if you start asking yourself a simple question that you can remember from this second step, why did this happen the way that it did? You'll get an answer. Apply the question again. Why did this happen the way that it did? Go deeper and deeper into your experiences. The word analyze means to examine methodically and in detail. And the more you analyze your situations, you start to find out formulas for why things happen the way that they do, which can be very valuable for other people. Step number 3 is finding value in your experience. When I first started publishing these videos to YouTube, people would see the video of me in the gym playing basketball, and they would say, man, you're pretty good. You're a professional. Hey, who do you play for? Well, I'm kind of unemployed right now. I'm between jobs. They would say, well, how'd you play in college in order to get so good to become a pro? Well, I actually kind of got kicked off the basketball team as a junior in college, so I didn't do much. And they would say, well, Dre, listen, I'm in high school right now, and I want to become a pro. So tell me, how many points did you score in high school in order to get to the point that you could become a professional? How many points did I score? Not enough. Now, you may think me telling these things to these people asking me these questions, telling them the truth, might have turned them off to me. Maybe they would have said, well, why do I even need to listen to this guy? He's an unemployed basketball player. He didn't even play his last year and a half in college. He sat on the bench all 4 years he was in high school, or the 1 year he was on the team in high school. This guy's been failing his whole career. What do I need to learn from this guy? Well, let me tell you what actually happened. When I started sharing those truths with people, I started receiving all types of messages, DMs, emails from people who would say to me, Dre, I really appreciate you sharing your story with us because you're giving me hope. You're representing an example to me that it is possible it can happen. Because you know what, Dre? I'm in high school right now, and I'm sitting on the end of the bench. I graduated college 3 years ago, and I don't know how to start my career. Someone told me a long time ago that it was too late for me to make it in basketball, but hearing from you gives me hope to know that it's still possible. How you get value from your experiences is that you have to sharpen your skill of observation. And how you do this is very simple. Everything you go through, ask yourself this question. If I had to teach a class on this, if I had to give a 15-minute presentation on it, if I had to make a 10-minute video on the topic, what would be the takeaway? What do I want people to get from it? Yes, even the worst things that you go through. This sharpens your skill of observation, not just of what's happening outside of and around you, but also what's happening internally. Why did I think this? Why do I feel this way? Why did I make that decision? And even though you've already been through the experience, this can be super valuable to the people who are coming behind you. Now, step number 4. We've looked at all our good and bad experiences, step 1, analyzed everything that happened and extracted the value from it. But how do you put all this together? How do you make this into something real and something tangible? Step number 4 is speaking up. As an entrepreneur these days, I have many conversations with, I guess we call them wantrepreneurs. People who want to do things. They want to get on stage and be a public speaker, write a book, start blogging, make videos and post them online, but they're not doing it. And when they start telling me about these things, I ask the obvious question that you may be thinking: what's stopping you? Why aren't you doing it? Why haven't you begun? The answer is usually some form of the following: I'm not good enough. I haven't done enough. I don't know enough. I'm not as good as this person over here who's been doing it for 15 years before I even got involved. Understand that that's the point. You are the only person on this planet who has experienced your exact experience. There's no one else out there who can tell your story better than you. There's no one else out there who can tell your story, period. And when you start speaking up, telling the world where you've been, what you've been through, and what you're dealing with, your perfect audience will select themselves. These are the people who are right now sitting in the seat that you sat in 6 weeks ago, 8 months ago, and 10 years ago. They're going to seek you out. And when they come to you for help them out. And when they keep coming back, charge them for it. In conclusion, for all the athletes, the artists, the students, anyone who's heavily invested into anything you've done in your life and you haven't quite gotten the return on investment that you expected to this point, understand that life is working for you even when it seems to not be working. Start seeing every experience you go through as material and stop waiting for things to work in your favor. Waiting for things to work for you in life is kind of like shooting a half-court shot in basketball, where it might go in, but there's a good chance it doesn't even come close. I challenge you here today to look at all your experiences, both the good and especially the bad. Go deep and analyze everything that happened and why it happened. Extract the value from all those experiences. Speak up about where you've been and what you've been through, and turn that half-court shot into a layup. Thank you.